Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, Frank Herbert's Dune, Part 1.
Arrakis. Dune. Wasteland of the Empire. And the most valuable planet in the universe. Because it is here, and only here, where spice is found. The spice. Without it, there is no commerce in the Empire. There is no civilization. Arrakis. Dune. Home of the spice. Greatest treasure in the universe. And he who controls it, controls our destiny.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that walks without rhythm so it won't attract the worm. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
I'll tell you what's real. He who controls spice controls destiny. I was pretty ready.
That's right, Jordan. This week we are watching the 2000 miniseries, Frank Herbert's Dune.
Yeah, you could really do a drinking game with any time someone says spice. In about 5 minutes, you'd be drunk.
It's a spice-heavy movie.
Yeah, it is a spice-heavy movie.
Let's get into it then, I guess. Jordan, what's your history with Dune?
I've never read the book. I've always meant to. It's one of those, books that are sitting there, and I'm like, I'm going to get to Dune. I just haven't got to it yet. But I did watch the 84 movie. I think it was 84 it came out, right?
I think that's right.
I actually watched it rather recently in the last year or so for the first time. So my perspective is, in 2018 or 2019, whenever I watched it, and I'll be honest, I did not love it. I know people think it's a classic and or at worst a cult classic, but I did not love it. Did you really like that movie?
I'm not sure you're right about people loving it. I think people don't love it.
Oh, is that right? I assumed that everyone enjoyed Dune. I found it to be a narrative mess and rather poorly acted and really plotting.
No, I think the general consensus is not a good movie. I will say I am an apologist. I actually think I kind of like David Lynch's version. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I enjoyed watching it when I saw it.
Right.
I think it's got a lot of imagination and it can be a lot of fun.
And you've read the book, right?
I've also read the book. So I've read it in, I don't know, must have been like 2002. So it's been a long, long time since I've read it. And I don't remember it particularly well. I think it was okay, though. That's what I remember.
Do they say spice a lot?
It's all about the spice, Jordan.
It's all about the spice.
That's the whole thing.
The one thing I thought was interesting is this miniseries we're watching is different in one way from everything else we've watched so far this season, in that I don't think this was ever intended to become a TV series. This was intended to be a miniseries, a long adaptation of the book, and it actually did very well for sci-fi. It, at the time, was the highest rated show that they had on, and it won some Emmys, which is kind of crazy to me. And it was successful enough that it had a sequel, Children of Dune, in 2003, a sequel miniseries.
Right. Yeah, I read a little something about this too. That was for a while like sci-fi's like highest rated show or like viewed show.
In terms of that, this was a success because it spawned a sequel, and I don't think that was ever intended. And also, everything we've sort of watched has been, failed attempts at series, and I don't think that's what this was meant to be.
Yeah, no, I think this was supposed to be a standalone piece. And it's kind of impressive that it made a second miniseries that to come off, because I think Dune has, 4 or 5 sequel books. So there's lots of story to pull from, I guess. And certainly this is probably the furthest anyone's ever visualized the Dune franchise.
Right.
So Jordan, this came out December 3rd, 2000. What would you have been doing if you weren't watching this highly rated television program?
I have to think. So this was in 2000. How old were we, Luke? We were 18.
Would have been an 18. I would have been in high school.
I'd have been spending a lot of time in the music room in high school. That was my thing. I hung, in a lot of bands.
You were in bands?
Not like cool bands. Like I was in jazz band and pit band and senior band and
what did you
all those
play?
Sorts of things. I play trumpet.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, I did a lot of that in high school. So, and it was also a good way to avoid other things. So like I could hide from doing like, my proper homework and stuff and just hang out in there.
Were you like really big into the cherry poppin' daddies or whatever they're called?
The what?
You know that the cherry poppin' daddies. Those what's that brand of music called? The big band rebirth that came with swingers.
Oh, with like Brian Seltzer Orchestra, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Sorry, what did you call them?
The cherry poppin' daddies.
Is that what they were called? That sounds like a name that I wouldn't have agreed to.
I'm looking it up right now.
I definitely would not have called myself a cherry poppin' daddy in high school.
Well, that was the band. It's not what you called yourself.
I thought you meant that was the genre, what they were referring to themselves as.
No, it was like I guess they did like Zoot Suit Riot.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Big horn bands.
I wasn't really into that, no.
You were into classical trumpet playing.
That's right, yeah. What were you doing in 2000?
I was probably just getting ready to graduate, go to university. I was like the last 6 months of high school.
It was just full steam ahead? You're like, I'm getting out of this town and never looking back?
I think I probably was finishing my first semester where I had front-loaded all my classes so I could have a very easy second semester and just like slide out of school.
Yeah. So, back to Dune. There's one thing I want to mention, and I don't know if you had this in your notes, but so we're watching one of 4 versions of this series, which is weird that there's that many, but from the little bit of reading I've done so far, the original edit that went to the Sci-Fi Channel was 280 minutes, so it was one long, like nearly 4-hour movie. They had some cuts they wanted to make, obviously, for violence and nudity and that sort of thing. The version that aired in the States, in the US version, was 265 minutes. They took out 15 minutes of whatever was deemed unacceptable. There was the UK version, which I couldn't find out how long it was or how it was different, but the version we're watching is the director's cut, which has 6 more minutes of content. So that should make these podcasts 6 minutes longer. And so we're watching the 286-minute version.
Jordan, I don't know if it's a good thing that our podcasts are minute per minute equal to the things we're watching.
It's true, because this is going to be you know what? I thought of this ahead of time. We're going to have to whip over some of these, because there's a lot of scenes where people just walk around.
There certainly are, Jordan. Well, let's get into it, but first, I have to tell you, Jordan, what was happening in the world when this show was airing.
Oh, right.
I mean, I know you wouldn't want to miss this.
What was our last show was 2003, so I mean, I can't believe we're going to find out what was happening between Harsh Realm and Almost Human.
It's actually during the period of time when Frank Herbert's Dune was airing, was during the Florida recount for the Bush-Gore election.
A lot of hanging Chad jokes were happening at that time.
Oh, big hanging Chad joke time. What an era.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It was the golden age of comedy, wasn't it?
Golden age of comedy. We were all a lot more innocent back then.
That's before irony died. Remember after September 11th, they said irony was no more?
Yeah, no more irony. We're done with it.
Yeah.
Who said that?
I don't know. Stupid people.
Other than that was the big event of December. All right, Jordan, should we do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here's the IMDb summary for episode 1 of Frank Herbert's Dune. On the order of the Emperor, Dirk Leto Atreides moves his family from his home planet Caladan to another planet, Arrakis, also known as Dune.
Says someone who's read the book. Did they ever explain why it's Arrakis and Dune? Like, I'm assuming Dune's a nickname because it's a lot of sand dunes, but is that why?
Yeah.
Oh, so why didn't he just call it Dune? Why even bother with giving it 2 names?
Because it's a very rich, complicated universe full of many houses and much political intrigue.
Right, yeah, okay, that answers it.
I will say one thing right off the top. I enjoyed this Dune title treatment they gave off the top. Like, it was kind of like carved into sand, the title Dune.
Yeah.
As the credits rolled by. Up until, like, it started crumbling into dust and it became clear how bad the VFX were going to be.
We'll get into it, but I think I'm going to slightly disagree with you. I think half of the special effects are pretty good and half of them are pretty bad.
Interesting. Well, what I was excited about, Jordan, was that once more we have a hero who has a lot of dream sequences.
Yeah, there is a lot of dreams in this, and they really push that idea, which I know was in the 84 movie. I'm assuming it's a character point in the book as well. But we open on a dream. Actually, we open on narration, don't we?
No, we open on a dream, I think, because there's it was a weirdly edited battle sequence was happening, and then it cuts to
A melting face.
Willem Hurt, who plays Leto, Atreides, the main character's dad, and he kind of dries into beef jerky before our eyes.
I didn't really read much before. I was like, I'm just gonna go into this blind, and I didn't realize William Hurt was in it. And I saw his like face building. I was like, that looked a lot like William Hurt. And then when he showed up later, I was like, that makes sense. Hey, can I stop for 1 second? I want to mention one thing, and I forgot off the top. Because we're watching this as one whole part, and I looked and saw that each of these 3 episodes don't actually have names. I'd like to name each of them, and I've decided this part 1 is called "The Spice Must Flow."
You love the idea they say spice all the time.
Yeah, so this one's called "The Spice Must Flow," part 1.
Wait, so is it gonna be this part? Is the Spice Must Flow part 2, and then the Spice Must Flow part 3?
No. Part 2 and part 3 will have different titles.
Okay, I can't wait to hear them.
Yeah, I know, it's very important.
Essentially, though, kind of after this dream sequence, we enter what I kind of called the first sequence of the show, because there's a lot of scenes that come and go, and like you mentioned, a lot of people just walking and talking, and this is a dense book, and it's all about like past histories and like houses and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like very proto Game of Thrones. So I kind of just broke into the first sequence where we're introduced to Paul and he's on a spaceship waiting to go to Dune.
Right. I thought the ship looked pretty good. It was a real slick kind of white looking ship. What'd you think of it? You didn't like it as much?
I hated it.
You hated it? Oh, I didn't hate it.
Everything looked like a mid-90s video game where the cutscenes were all live action.
Right. I didn't hate it.
Jordan, I'm going to be honest with you. Now, you didn't make this show. You were involved with the creation of this show. I hated you for the first 45 minutes of watching this show. I blamed you for it. I was angry that I was watching it, and I was just like putting it all on you.
I'll be honest. I think every single time I've recommended we watch something, you have hate watched it, and the hate is directed at me. That seems to be a recurring theme.
That's not entirely true. I mean, it was really before this. This is only comparable to Justice League.
Oh, right. You were angry at me for Justice League.
As I was watching the first 45 minutes of this, before I had to turn it off, because I was just so unhappy.
We should say, this has a lot of the problems that I find TV movies and miniseries often have. It's very plotting. There's so many scenes of people talking, and the reason they're talking is because they don't want to have some sort of special effect thing. And they're trying to get so much information across, and not all of it may be interesting. So I don't know if it's an adaptation issue from the book, but there's just talking and scenes, and you just want to stop and go, guys, what was important of all this? Like, sometimes it's important, but sometimes it's a whole scene, and then one line was important.
I mean, we'll get into it as we go, but yeah, I've got a lot of complaints.
Okay.
I will say there's something I did like about the ship because it was kind of insane. Like the exterior of the ship seems to be just a bunch of like flat metal panels. Like they're huge where people live inside of them. And they're all like spinning together like in a bundle. None of them are attached to each other. They're just kind of circling each other in like a vortex. But the ship has no body.
There is like, because you do see at one point they're walking down a pathway and there's like a force field above them. Do you think that everything just has little force fields on it?
Yeah, I feel like the ship is just like a whole bunch of, like, let's say that each piece is a kilometer by a kilometer. Let's just say it's a big flat square place where people live inside of like a little ant colony. There seems to be like dozens of those, none of them touching each other, but all kind of like revolving in a circle around each other in kind of like a bundle of some sort. I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at production design wise, but I will say I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked. I was like, I've never seen a ship that looks like this weird flying pine cone that's breaking apart.
Yeah, it's very, that was at least interesting. You know what? I will give it that. We kind of meet Paul Atreides, who's our hero. He's the guy who's moving to Dune because his dad got a job running Dune, which is, the big spice repository. The what do they say? Spice is the thing that makes like universal commerce possible.
Yeah, so Dune is the only place where spice is mined. Would it be mined? It produced.
Yeah, it's kind of like just scooped off the sand.
As I said earlier, he who controls the spice controls destiny.
Exactly. So spice is the hot commodity. They're going out there. The old guys who ran the place are out. Paul's dad is in, and they got to move out there. Paul's a little bit of a whiny baby about it, but whatever. He's a real Luke Skywalker.
He is very whiny, and for all the time they take to explain a ton of backstory and a ton of family intrigue and backstory, it's never explained why he's so whiny, other than he's just a whiny rich little brat.
This is basically it. His mother's a woman named Lady Jessica. She's not married to her dad. She's like a concubine, I guess.
She's a bound concubine, is what they say.
Bound concubine. But she's from I guess not a race, but like a group of space mystics called the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, and they all have weird little voices, right? That's their thing. They get gravelly at sometimes, like they're Batman.
Yeah, well, they go to see the Reverend Mother, who's going to run some tests on Paul right at the start, and like she starts talking in like a real low voice, and then Paul like matches her, so I guess they both have whatever this power is. I think the idea is when they talk in a low voice, they can maybe mind control people. It's like the Force.
Yeah, and so this is one of my, I suppose, is a complaint. They add these sorts of scenes in, and I know it's like important to the book, but it's not really important, at least up to this point in the story. And in this first part, it still doesn't get resolved why it matters that they have these voices.
They definitely don't go into a lot of explanation for as to what it means that they have these voices. I'm assuming it'll come back up. I don't really remember from the books, but I assume it'll come back up at some point.
What I do like about this scene, though, is the old woman. I didn't catch her name.
They call it the Reverend Mother.
The Reverend Mother, and she's got these sort of like a hat that makes her look. She has Mickey Mouse ears.
She looks like Lady Gaga.
Right, yeah. So they go see Lady Gaga, and she does the old, hey, put your hand in this and see what happens test.
Yeah, it's like a big black box, and they shove his hand in, and she's like, if you pull your hand out, I'll murder you. And it just sort of shows his hand, like it becomes clear, and his hand kind of boils and starts to rot away.
Yeah, she does this test. He doesn't pull his hand out, and he pulls it out, and she's like, hey, I guess you're tougher than you look. And it was like, okay, great.
Do you know what she actually says, which I was very confused by?
What did she say?
She says, no woman child has ever withstood that much pain.
Is that what she said? No woman child?
I know. I was just like, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, I guess that's something to do. There's some sort of like subplot that it literally never comes up, I don't think. That his mom was supposed to have a girl so his dad could marry her off to some other house, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so there's again, they mentioned that in a later scene, and it was one of those things where I was like, guys, you can cut this. No one cares.
I realized as we started watching, I was just like, oh, I'm sort of remembering pieces of this book now, and it's a lot of stuff about like inter-house politics in this like massive space empire, and I'm like, this is gonna be a slog.
Yeah, because the people making this had decided, we're gonna make this as much like reading a book as possible.
Also, I guess the Bene Gesserit speak some ancient languages. So occasionally throughout the episode, Lady Jessica will speak one of these ancient space languages. But for whatever reason, the version we're watching is already subtitled in another language.
Yeah.
And then when she speaks a different language, a third language is subtitled under that so that I can't even read what she's supposed to be saying. I was also cursing you during this period of time for some reason.
I know. I don't think you can blame the movie on that. It's just the version we have, but it was funny. It was like there was 4 people talking at once. I always just, when I see that sort of thing, I was like, no, I guess it doesn't matter.
I'm never going to know.
I'm never going to know. It doesn't matter.
It so far it doesn't seem to have mattered any of the subtitling. I'm sure it was a few more like plot points, but I don't think I've missed anything anyway. After all this kind of setup about who's Paul and who's his mom and why they're moving to Dune to take care of spice trade, etc., they finally are gonna like launch off and fly this ship across the universe to Arrakis.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sort of some talk about the people who pilot these things, the pilots. And I just thought it was gonna be like a dude who pilots it, but they push out this big like jar, this giant jar. These guys with huge blue cone heads push out this jar, and it opens up, and the pilot comes out of the jar, and I believe it's the Bat Boy from National Enquirer flies out.
It's a weird bat person. It's funny you caught that, because already my attention was waning, and I'm gonna blame that on all of my generalities going forward. But I wasn't sure what this was, because I remember in the 84 Dune, there's a point where some guys come onto the ship and they open this canister and there's like a floating head or something. And I thought that's what this was supposed to be. I didn't realize this was the pilot. But that's, I wrote my note as like, did that bat person just make a star and then they went through a wormhole? That was my note.
Yeah, well, what they say in the show is that the pilots need spice to fly, and Paul says, I hear they used to be human. And I mean, when you see this bat person, it's clearly humanoid. So I think the implication is spice has been used to kind of over time create these beings that are able to, I thought of it as folding space. They seem to be able to do, kind of make faster than light travel possible because they're able to shape space somehow. I guess spice has altered them in a way that gives them some sort of mental power to do this thing.
I was surprised they didn't spend like 35 minutes explaining it like they do about every other little plot point that's not important to the movie.
This is why I knew I knew I was going to be angry at you the whole time. So I was going to have to write all this stupid stuff down, and you're going to be like, I don't know why. And I'm like, I'm going to have to explain it all to you.
You don't have to explain it to me. We could just keep going.
I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing you. I'll be honest. I watched the first 45 minutes, was very angry at you, stopped, came back, and was much more at peace with the second half of the 45 minutes. So I think I'm ready to see the whole series.
Good.
I had to stop, meditate, find my peace, come back.
And we're introducing old chubby checker. What's his name?
Well, they arrive at Dune, and you kind of get this shot of the planet fills the screen. It's this big desert planet. And then in the center of the planet, a face appears and starts monologuing to us about something or another. And this is the first appearance of Baron Harkonnen, the villain of the piece.
Yeah.
But how did you like that Man in the Moon thing?
Well, at first, I just thought it was a weird stylistic thing, and then I realized it was, because what you see is it's kind of like his face looking at the screen or something. I mean, the director was going for something. I don't know. It was fine, I guess.
Well, the Harkonnens are, they're going to be our big baddies. They're another house that I guess there's a bunch of houses like Game of Thrones, and these guys they're kind of known for their gluttonousness, and weirdly seem to like have stolen a bunch of iconography from the Klingons in this adaptation.
Right?
Even though like they're not like Klingons, because they're not really. I guess they're a little bit of a warring house, but they're mostly kind of just like a fat lazy house.
What I liked was the one guy, the nephew. I don't know what his name. Fatty Arbuckle's nephew. There, he had a very late '90s, early 2000s hair. He had that like sort of like Roman haircut, and I enjoyed that. I like those little signposts of when a show was shot. It's a science fiction from the '70s because everyone has sideburns.
I liked the other nephew because he wore a big triangle behind his head.
I know he did. It was just, you know what though? I'm all for that. I'm like, sure, why not?
The costume design in this is ridiculous on a kind of good side of that. Like it's all very over the top. And no joke, when I said the Reverend Mother looked like Lady Gaga, like it looked like a Lady Gaga costume. Like all of this stuff looks like a really over the top pop singer would wear.
Yeah, it's like the costume designer was like, oh, you're only going to give me $10 for this budget? Well, here you go.
What we come to learn is there's like several generations of the Harkonnens have controlled Dune up till now, and they've been real dictators of the planet. And having lost it, like this is a huge loss to their income, a huge loss to their self-respect as a house. And they sort of have this idea, or at least Baron Harkonnen floats that he's going to get back Dune. He's got a plan. He's got a traitor on the inside with Duke Leto, who's running the planet now, and they're basically going to betray him and kind of get their stuff back. And he as he does this, he's snorting lines of spice as he does these plans.
Oh, and one other thing, is this where they first mention the currency of Dune? Because I wrote down, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're called solaries?
Oh, you know what? I might have missed this.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, maybe there's something to look out for in the next episodes, because I know how exciting that is. But I'm pretty sure they referred to a currency of solaries, because I assumed everything would just be spice, because they use spice for everything, it seems.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be a currency. You're right. They do have other currency, because a lot of people are buying water on Dune because there's so little water. You spend your wages on something to drink. This sort of does pop us down to the planet where we finally get to hang out with William Hurt a bit as this Duke Leto, Paul's dad, and he lives in this like huge palace on this desert planet. This is, I guess, where they're setting up. And we get to know kind of the people who live on the planet are called the Fremens, and he's trying to make peace with them because they've been long subjugated by the Harkonnens.
Yeah, and you get the sense really early. They really hammer home the point in a couple scenes that he is a very benevolent leader as opposed to how the Harkonnens had been running things. He's very nice. His wife/concubine is very nice to everyone, and he seems a lot more liberal in his way to treat everyone.
Yeah, he sends his right-hand man Duncan off to try to like make friends with the Fremen tribes. He's really trying to like be a man of the people to sort of, to control the spice trade, but in a more peaceful way.
Do you like that old Leto's room was all purple?
Listen, all of the sets in this are epic. Like, set design is huge. Like, everything is a huge palace room. A lot of money went into these sets. It is just too bad that the entire thing looks like it was shot on video and everything's staged like it's a play. It's just like awful to watch.
Yeah, it's true. But I like that he had a purple room because the Harkonnens' room was all red, and they're just like colors.
Well, this is what it feels like. It feels like someone videotaped a play.
Yeah.
And it was so unwatchable for the first 45 minutes to me. I'm just like, this is terrible. This isn't a TV show. This isn't a good idea. This is a disaster.
But on the positive note, in the next couple scenes, you get to see William Hurt topless in like a post-coital scene.
Well, that's something, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this early stuff is kind of, there's a bunch of meetings about taxes and trading routes and smuggling. There's a lot of kind of dull stuff right off the top, for sure.
I love that because we're gonna probably get ready because we'll keep saying this over the course of the next 3 hours, the next few episodes of this podcast. But this thing has such a problem with forward momentum. It's just like scene and now a scene and now a scene, but it's never quite clear how this is pushing the story forward at all. And stuff like, you're right. There's like a scene with like taxes, so we can know that Paul might have a good head on his shoulders. Like, who cares? Who cares about these taxes?
Yeah, it's a hazard of Dune. That's for sure. Is that, it is about the minutia, and I think you have to be. I gotta ask you this right now: the 1983 version must be looking pretty good by comparison.
You know what? It had some very similar problems, and up until like a good chunk of this is very like beat by beat the same thing. But sadly, it moves faster than this.
Absolutely. It does start to pick up, actually. I would say, like, this is around the 45 minutes where I had to quit, curse your name to all the gods, take a break, and then come back. And from this point forward, it really did pick up a little bit, because we meet this Dr. Keen, who's a local Fremen who helps them. He's like a biologist who helps them do this stuff, and they basically take a flight out to kind of watch how some of this spice is collected, and things really start to pick up from here, I found anyway. Maybe I just calmed down. But they like take these crazy flying machines out to watch, the design of these are insane.
They land with like legs sort of things. Like,
they're just houseflies.
it wasn't CGI, right? Were they little models?
I think some of it was CGI, some of it was models, but they're just houseflies. That's all they are.
Is that what they're supposed to look like?
All they look like is houseflies. They're just like fat bodies, little wings, and then little like sucky legs that
Little sucky legs. Yeah. Well,
they look completely unmaneuverable.
you know what? They work in those sandstorms.
Yeah, apparently. But they get out, and we get to see kind of them putting on these still suits, which is a big thing in the book. It's a suit designed to like any water you're losing from sweat or bodily materials. It takes it, repurposes it into water, so you won't die when you're out in the desert.
I did think the theater 1984 version of Dune, these suits look better. I thought,
really?
Yeah, I just thought like, I mean, look, they look less practical. They were these weird like muscular bodysuits. In this, I just thought like, I was like, oh, they weren't evocative of anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't spend a lot of time on them, and they didn't really even like when they introduced them, they don't even like do a full body shot of them. They're just kind of like, yeah, this is what they do, and they don't really spend a lot of time getting to know them. But it's kind of a nice detail, and they fly out and they get to see this huge spice harvester driving across the desert. It's really low polygon count because it's a terrible VFX, but it's out there sucking up the spice off the sand.
Yeah, but that brings sandworms.
And thank God. I will say this was the highlight of the episode, these sandworms.
I'd agree.
They're like the scale of them is absolutely insane. They like managed to nail like the unimaginable scale of these worms.
Yeah, because they look like, I don't even know what it would be in ratio, but they look like they could eat the little ships without even noticing it.
Yeah, they're city sized. They're bigger than a city. They're like so big.
I thought I liked it. I thought it was good.
And they got some big sarlacc like mouths. They got all those like tentacles in the mouth or like teeth or whatever. And they fly down. They rescue the workers on this little harvester to show what good people they are. And they get away, and the harvester gets eaten. But what I liked is when they come back, Paul's kind of studying a hologram of the worms to like learn more about them, and it like had the funny like it's just a voiceover explaining what the worms are, and it's like the funniest, dumbest misdirect ever because it like kind of comes back probably from a commercial or something, and it's just like, these are the worms. There's no evidence of a link between worms and spice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'm sure not. I'm sure there's nothing between them.
Yeah, it's just one of those weird things like, why would you ever even mention that?
Yeah, this will never come back up.
You're like, hey, you know that guy over there wearing a hat? There's no association between the hat and the wind. You're like, what? Why would you ever even say that? And later on, of course, it's a flying hat.
Oh, of course. I should have seen it coming.
Right? Yeah.
And we get a little explanation too. This Dr. Keynes, this Fremen biologist who was helping the family, he gives a bit of explanation around this idea the Fremen have of the Mahdi.
They're like a messiah. It's the idea of a coming messiah.
Yeah, and what do they expect this messiah to do when it comes to Arrakis or Dune?
I don't know what they wanted. I just wrote down that I really focused on getting the spelling right, so I could tell you how it's spelled.
Great. Well, they sort of talk about how this Messiah, he'll be born of a Bene Gesserit, which Paul is, so good sign.
Yeah.
But essentially starts talking about how this Mahdi will change the very climate of Dune into something more habitable.
Right, that's right. And they do sort of lay the groundwork for that a little bit because there's an earlier scene that's just insufferably long where you see that there's plants in the main what do you call it? Like castle.
Yeah, in the palace.
In the palace. And they sort of have a scene about like, oh, plants can grow here? Like, yeah, use a lot of water. And I was like, okay, why is this here? But it's clearly they're setting up for later that the planet can, if they had the proper Messiah, they could have plants.
Oh, interesting. I read that scene because it's a bit of like a eco center on the thing. And I read it because they had a conversation about how it was only there so the Harkonnens could like rub it in the face of the Fremens about how much water they were wasting on these dumb plants. It was a way of punishing them further.
Classic Harkonnens.
Because Lady Jessica tells her housemaid that let everybody, all the Fremen can come look at it. At least they'll feel better about it then.
And they do. Everyone loves plants.
But going forward, the story does pick up here. That we get a scene where an assassin tries to kill Paul with this hunter-seeker.
It almost looked like a worm or a bug of some sort.
Yeah, it's a little metal drone
that comes through the room. But you know what I liked about it? It came through the room through like a little portal above his bed. But that portal, like it's like a little like sliding door. But it seemed like that was designed exactly for that dart. I don't know what else would they use that for? Like delivering a food directly into his bed?
I thought that too. I was like, what is the practical purpose of this weird door that opens above his bed? And then it kind of occurred to me, like, oh, right, the Harkonnens are evil. Maybe they just designed a bunch of, like, weird traps. That's how I wrote it off.
Yeah, but anyways, a dart comes in. He does the whole, like, don't move. And then he's able to not get killed by the dart. But it goes into... Oh, he saves the servant girl. And they keep trying to push this. I'm like, who's the servant girl? Who cares about her?
Oh, yeah, she was sort of nameless. I'm not sure if that'll come back. But did you catch how the drone operates? The hunter-seeker?
Wasn't it the same as like the T-Rex? It can only sense movement?
Well, that's the thing. It can only attack if there's movement. It can only see movement. But there's an operator using it. So I guess the video camera it has is only picking up movement?
Yeah, that's right.
After Paul kind of like catches it and crushes it, there's a big hunt for the operator through the castle, and their resident war master manages to catch the guy and cuts the guy's throat. And Duke Leto's pretty pissed off. His son was almost murdered. And what does he say to do with the body of the drone operator?
I have no idea.
He tells the war master to burn the body, except the hands, which they're gonna fill with spice and send to the Baron Harkonnen.
Oh, really? Well, that's...
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was a real good warning.
But he doesn't even have to do that because Harkonnen's angry already. He's already angry at his nephew because he did not want them to do an assassination attempt.
Yeah, basically his dumb nephew put this into place and is ignoring the Baron's larger plan to take down Leto. So he's very angry for a moment, and then they're like, oh, whatever, we'll just push up our plan. It doesn't really affect anything.
Yeah.
And I have so many questions because I'm just I don't really understand what the plan was. I guess initially he's the plan is I'm going to let him get real comfortable and then I'm going to get him.
I guess the idea is that he has been given this new position and he is already very wary of people pulling him out of that position. So he wants him to get comfortable and then he'll attack. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a plan.
I guess so.
He's a big old lazy guy. He just is using an excuse to sit around.
Well, that probably explains it because he doesn't even stick to that plan. It's a week goes by. He's I can't wait any longer. Anyway, it goes from here into a bit of a dinner party sequence where the Emperor's daughter shows up as a sign of goodwill from the Emperor. So there are houses in this universe. There's an Emperor who runs the galaxy, I guess. And he's got a daughter who's covered in butterflies who he sends to hang out at this dinner party.
But the whole thing is there's a banquet scene for some reason. There's a lot of conversations about water that I wasn't paying attention to.
You didn't get all the stuff about the Fremen water customs?
Honestly, I could not have paid less attention if possible.
Well, what did they do with the princess's bath towels?
I have no idea. I wasn't paying attention.
They confiscated them for their squeezings.
Okay, sure. Honestly, it was when they get into these conversations, it's so boring. I just am waiting for something to happen. I don't want to see a bunch of people sit around and talk about stuff that I can't see and I don't care about. Do
the Fremen drink their dead's blood, Jordan?
Sure, I don't know.
No, they drink all the moisture of their dead.
This is great. I don't even need to watch the show.
Jordan, are the birds on Arrakis cannibals?
It seems like a weird question to ask if they weren't, so I'm going to assume they were, but I don't know.
They aren't. They just drink blood, but not their own. Because there's no water to drink.
Man, if this was a test, I would not be doing well.
You're not even watching this movie.
This scene, I was just something happened. Please, something happened.
Well, eventually Paul does leave the banquet and he goes off to hang out with this War Master guy who's drinking some spice beer and playing his lute.
Oh, and here he does he does what I assume is supposed to be an impersonation of the Harkonnen guy, but it's evocative of nothing.
He puts on a little play for the War Master where he pretends to be Baron Harkonnen of the House Hog.
Nailed it.
Because he's so big. This is satire at its finest.
But guess what? The princess was listening the whole time.
Yes, the princess pops in and she's there. They kind of flirt. They have a bit of a conversation about, which of these two rich heirs has it worse, whiny Paul or whiny princess. They both are complaining about what a hard lives they have. It's just so disingenuous.
But they're also supposed to be flirting, but the acting is... Now, I don't know if I'm going to change my opinion on the guy who's playing Paul, but I find his acting so wooden. I don't really know what he's trying to articulate from scene to scene.
I mean, I think this early bit is just supposed to show he's supposed to be a bit of this whiny rich kid, I think. I think this is the purpose. He's supposed to eventually evolve into a hero. And what we're seeing, I think, in this first episode is him... as this pretty sheltered kid who's thinks he knows best, but has no life experience.
Right, but in this scene, you're supposed to see two people flirting, and it does not work at all. If this is supposed to be a setup for a romance later, I didn't think it worked.
I think it was fine. It was not as bad as other things we've seen.
All right.
I mean, we just watched two actors barely look at each other across a room, and we're sold that as romance. This was better than that.
That's true.
Anyway, Leto's right hand Duncan gets back from hanging out with the Fremen, and they've made some headway into getting involved with the Fremen tribes, and to show their respect, one of them just spits on the ground.
You do that.
Why did he spit on the ground, Jordan?
I don't know.
It was a thank you. He was thanking him with his body's water.
Whoever it was that complained earlier that my attention to detail is not very good on this, they're having a field day with this episode. What I say to them in response is, you watch this.
I'd love to come on, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, that night, kind of after this banquet, the big attack from the Harkonnen starts. They basically put their plan into effect, and the head maid gets killed, and Leto gets paralyzed.
Her name is Mapes.
Mapes the head maid, that's right. It doesn't matter, she's dead now.
She's dead now, and she goes, traitor, shields. And that's all they can give her to let you know what the plan is.
I mean, it doesn't matter because they don't stop the plan.
Yeah.
The traitor is revealed, and he's this character we've seen once or twice, this guy named Dr. Yue, maybe? Dr. Yue?
Either way, you basically get a thing that he betrayed them by, I don't think you actually see this, but I know it from the other movie, is that he essentially pulls down the shields to the city so the other guys can attack, essentially decimating everything. And the reason he did it was old, what's his name? Baron Harkonnen, whatever his name is. He sort of promised him that he's going to get his wife back, who he's held captive.
Right. And Dr. Yue, now, is he a mentant?
I think he is.
Because this is something they keep mentioning. It's some sort of like smarty pants you keep around to advise you, and they seem to have some sort of conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear. I know that not everyone is sort of approves of it because the sort of right-hand guy to Paul, that's secret, he sort of like poo-poos them.
Yeah, well, Paul even says at some point, he's like, well, he couldn't be the traitor because his conditioning would never allow him to be. So it's weird. There's some sort of thing they've done, I guess, to keep them loyal, but it doesn't work because his loyalty to his wife, I guess, supersedes this.
Right.
At any rate, what he's done is he's paralyzed Leto. So he can't do anything. Willem Hurt's just on the ground, paralyzed. But he feels bad for what he's done, and he goes to him and he gives him something so that in the end, Leto can get his revenge on Harkonnen for executing this plan.
And so what he gives him is a tooth, and what you find out is a tooth is sort of like a like what you would have seen like in a spy novel or something. You know, someone bites it and they kill themselves. But in this case, you bite down on it and it sprays out a gas to everyone in front of you and kills them.
Right. So it'll be a way for Leto to at least, well, he will still have lost everything, at least get his revenge on the person who did that. And what we kind of see is Harkonnen is attacking with his forces, and we also kind of get an implication that amongst these forces that came with the princess are the Emperor's forces, because the Emperor apparently also has a hate-on for Leto, because I guess Leto's also very popular, not just amongst the Fremen, but amongst the general houses.
Didn't that seem like a real roundabout way? Because the Emperor put Leto in charge of Dune. And so he kicked out Harkonnen to put Leto in, but then he had Harkonnen attack to get rid of Leto. I was like, that's a real weird way around of maybe just don't give him Dune to begin with.
It's definitely, I think whatever the background is certainly lost in translation here. But I was also just like, why did you put... I'm like, so complicated, everybody. This is so complicated.
It's complicated, but there's no real sense of intrigue, at least not in this version. It's just like, things happen. You're like, okay.
Exactly.
This is we should say, in the big attack scene, they sort of set this up, and it happens really quickly. It was a very unimpressive attack scene. Didn't you feel that way?
It goes by it takes place really quickly. You barely get any shots of soldiers attacking. And they kind of take the palace instantaneously. In fact, we don't even see, it happens off screen, but they catch Paul and Lady Jessica, and leave them in the dunes to die. They drop them off in the desert. All of it happens off screen.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about this. They spend so much time on scenes like talking about people's wet rags and using that for drinking water. But then in action scene, they like, oh yeah, don't worry, don't look over there. That's happening off screen.
And we finally get this scene where the Baron Harkonnen comes in, and he's got paralyzed Leto sitting at a desk and, gives him a big speech about why he's doing this generational feud. He's finally putting an end to the feud between their two houses by killing them all. And Dr. Yu shows up, and he's like, well, can I have my wife back now? And he's just like, surprise, I killed your wife, and now I'm going to kill you too.
He's a real jerk.
Just like, Dr. Yu, you could have seen this coming.
But you know what I like, though? Not only did he kill her, he kept her nice and preserved, and he brought her out as a nice display of, not only did I kill her, here she is. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I got her in this nice crystal coffin for you.
yeah, he was a real jerk.
Duke Leto, he's paralyzed, but he can still kind of talk, so he starts mumbling, trying to get Baron Harkonnen to come a little closer toward him so he can bite this tooth and kill him. And he almost gets him. He gets pretty close. He bites the tooth, but Baron Harkonnen thankfully has, because he's such a large man, has these anti-gravity things that we never really see up close, but I guess he can float. Mostly it just looks like a Peter Pan play where someone's on wires, but he kind of floats away so he gets away from the gas, which kills Leto and his henchmen. And we just get this insane scene where he floats up away from the gas, and he floats up toward the camera. Like the camera's like in the top corner of a very large set. And he floats all the way up to the camera, so he's like in frame. And then Harkonnen turns around, looks directly into the camera, and starts monologuing for the audience.
It was a weird choice. It was I can't remember what the term is, and I'm sorry to people who really know plays and things. But whatever that is, when you sort of break the fourth wall and just talk to the audience, that's exactly what was happening.
Absolutely. And then we kind of jump forward and we wake up in the desert with Paul and Lady Jessica. They've been left out there. Thankfully, one of these houseflies land nearby, and Duncan and Dr. Keynes are on to save them. We kind of get a little explanation around Duncan. Duncan has a ring from his father that he gave to him in case he ever died to give to Paul. And then the Harkonnen forces show up and start attacking this Fremen camp they're hiding out at. What did you think of those Harkonnen ships? They're like boomerangs or like little birds or something.
All of the ship designs don't seem to make a lot of sense, but they at least are interesting looking. I don't know how any of them work, but I was like, well, that looks like a weird ship, so I'll give them that.
That's true. I mean, they all do at least have a distinct visual cue.
And we do get a ship chase scene here.
Yeah, well, Paul and Jessica get away. They get on one of these housefly ships and try to get away. This right-hand man, Duncan, he's like, I can't go with you. I have to stay with the Fremen. And as they fly away, they just show him exploding.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was a bad idea.
I will say, in this first episode, they really cleared the cast of characters. Like, nobody we met at the beginning of this episode is alive, but like Jessica and Paul.
That's it.
Yeah, and they have a spaceship chase. There's one of those classic spaceship chase. It's a canyon run where you got to fly through the canyons, kind of like Star Wars or Independence Day or something.
After they come out through all these sort of like tunnels and mountainscapes and stuff, they see there's a big gigantic sandstorm, I guess you would call it. And it's sort of one of those like, you'd be crazy to go in the sandstorm. And it'd be like, wouldn't I be crazy not to? And they fly into the sandstorm, and that's sort of where this episode ends.
Yeah, it's kind of the end of part one of the miniseries. And it's really cleaned the slate. Like, we're kind of at a new story at this point. We've seen all this stuff. It's all been washed away for the most part, and now we're going to start fresh, I guess, part two.
Yeah. It was a long way to get where I know probably people who love the book would hate me saying this, but I feel almost like you could have started here and figured out how to show a lot of the other stuff. You know, like if this was an actual movie, like an hour-and-a-half movie as opposed to a 4-hour thing, I was just like, there was a lot of that didn't need to be in here.
I will say why I think I managed to, when I took my break at 45 minutes and came back and watched the last half, I really think how I made my peace at it is I kind of realized the director made a choice, for better or for worse. He read these books, and in his idea of the adaptation, probably unlike other adaptations, is he saw it really as a Shakespearean play. So it's all staged like a play. There's a lot of monologuing. There's often characters who will pop up like in a Shakespeare play, like two guards will kind of have a quick conversation that isn't so much a conversation as exposition about like, this queen had this happen and this king thinks this. And that happens quite a few times. And I think once I sort of accepted, I'm like, what I'm watching here is the writer-director's idea of how to adapt this is to treat it like Shakespeare.
Right. That's a good way of looking at it.
And if you think about it that way, I mean, it kind of works. Like the monologuing, all this Harkonnen talking to the camera, the ways of getting through exposition. Once I sort of tried to accept that as the reality of it, it became a little more palatable. I mean, not the way I would have preferred them to try, but it's at least an interesting take on the material, and that's something anyway. It's something.
Well, do you want to rate this?
Yeah, sure. Why not? What do you think, Jordan?
I think for a first episode, I think it had a few things going for it. I kind of liked how, look, as I said before, I think some of the design really worked. I think some of the special effects worked. I I'm a big fan of models, and I like matte painting backgrounds and stuff as opposed to seeing a CGI background. That's just my personal preference. There was a lot of that, and I liked it. Now, some of the flying sequences and things I didn't think looked as good in terms of special effects. I think some of the acting was a little bit wooden. I think it was a little bit plodding, but I like that one room was purple for no reason and one room was red for no reason, and I did like the designs of the weird costumes, and I like William Hurt. So I'm going to give this right down the middle of 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. Well, I just monologued about coming to accept the director's vision of it. And Willem Hurt's in it, and so's that giant sandworm, which I liked.
Oh yeah, the sandworm. I thought that looked good too.
Yeah. But I'm still giving it a 1. It sucks.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much when you give really, really low ones.
This movie sucks.
But you've given it there's no room for you to go lower now, because at least I have 4 through 1 now for the next episodes, which I'm assuming are going to get worse.
Oh, I don't think it could possibly get worse.
Oh, I love that. I love how unhappy you are. That's my favorite thing.
Well, I'm hoping things will pick up in episodes 2 and 3.
Oh no, I'm hoping they get worse.
Oh man, I don't know how I'll get through if they get worse.
This I say, even though I gave this a 5, this was the slowest thing I think I've watched in a long time for this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, real low point for us, I think, this one episode.
I stopped at one point to do laundry because that was more exciting than watching this.
And you get all those clean clothes.
That's true. It was a win-win.
Well, if you have anything to say about this Dune miniseries, maybe you watched it when it aired and you kind of have some thoughts, maybe placing it in its proper time zone of like the year 2000, maybe that helps like ground it in the right place. You can email us and kind of tell us about it at continuumdrag@gmail.com. And you know what? There will be some weird clips that we're going to put up for sure, because there's some weird visuals in this. I mean, that Bat Boy for one.
Yeah, if you just see those things, you'll think this is a real interesting TV show, but we'll be doing you a favor by only showing you the fun things.
You can follow us to see those on Instagram and Twitter at continuumdrag. And I guess I'm going to sign off now, Jordan, and try to get through the next episode. Maybe 15 minutes at a time. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, you know what? Either way, the spice will flow.
Hey, man, as long as that spice keeps flowing, I'll keep snorting it.
That's true. And on that note,
see you next week, Jordan.
See you later.
Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rick-Siedler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, and Dwayne Wright.